Eylon Levy, Israeli government spokesperson, is joining us now. The agony of those families, the agony of Palestinian mothers, parents. How much longer will this go on for?
Just heartbreaking to listen to the hostages' families speaking about their children who were abducted. There are children who are literally orphaned because Hamas death squads shot their parents in front of them on October 7th and took them into the Gaza Strip. And we're fighting this war to bring our hostages home and to destroy the terror state that perpetrated the October 7th massacre so it can never do it again. Now, unfortunately, we know that the days ahead are going to be long and they're going to be hard because Hamas has embedded itself illegally very deeply within civilian areas. Just yesterday, as the IDF makes its way through Gaza City, we uncovered rockets underneath mosques, weapons underneath schools, tunnels that literally went through people's living rooms. And we're committed to dismantling that terror state so they can never again perpetrate the atrocities like they did on October 7th, never again hurt our people, and we can restore security to the region.
I gave you the opportunity to sympathise with Palestinian parents. Would you like to take that opportunity?
Absolutely. The situation in the Gaza Strip as a result of Hamas declaring war on us on October 7th is heartbreaking. None of us want to be in this situation. And Kay, I'll tell you the truth, I'm angry. I'm angry that Hamas dragged us into this war. I am angry that Hamas is forcing us to fight through densely populated areas in order to reach the terrorist cowards who on October 7th burned, butchered, raped, tortured and mutilated their way through southern Israel. I wish there were another way out of this. I wish we could politely ask Hamas to step out of the way and it would leave us alone. But Hamas declared war on us and it's forcing us to fight. And we're doing everything we can to get civilians out of harm's way, warning them for 3 weeks to evacuate temporarily for their safety, setting up humanitarian corridors that have been attacked by Hamas, attacking the soldiers guarding those humanitarian corridors, facilitating the provision of aid through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. We want to see this suffering end. We want to see the fighting end, but it's only going to end with the end of Hamas and the defeat of Hamas. And I hope then we'll restore not only security for southern Israel, but also new opportunities for the Palestinian people to embrace a different path when it is understood that terrorism is a dead end and the atrocities like the ones that were committed on October 7th cannot and will not go unanswered.
What can Gazans do who have not been able to leave Gaza City and now find themselves encircled by IDF?
Israel has been continuing to operate humanitarian corridors over the last few days. And by the way, most residents of northern Gaza have heeded Israel's warning. Of the 1.1 million residents of northern Gaza, latest figures I've seen are that only 100,000 remain in the north, and that is before the humanitarian corridors of recent days. The fighting in northern Gaza is going to get dangerous. It's going to get dangerous because Hamas has literally embedded itself under people's homes, under schools, underneath hospitals, and those are all legitimate targets under international law. When Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK wants Israel to win, it wants us to go after these terror targets so they can never perpetrate the massacre again. And we hope that civilians will continue heeding our warning.
My understanding of international law is that they are only targets that you can aim at as long as civilians are not in the path of those missiles and rockets.
No, that is, so it's important that we're on the same page about international law, and I know that's very important for British, very important for British audiences especially. International law says that medical units may not be used under any circumstances to shield military targets. The fact that Hamas has its military headquarters in the basement of the Shifa hospital is a war crime, period. The next article of international law, I'm quoting Additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, generally taken as a faithful reflection of customary international law, says that those medical units may lose their protected status when they are used to shield military targets, as long as sufficient warning has been given and every possible precaution taken to get civilians out of harm's way. It does not say that the targets underneath hospitals may only be targeted once there are no civilians in the vicinity. It says they become legitimate targets when our army has made every possible precaution to get civilians out of harm's way. And I'll remind you, it's been 3 weeks now that Israeli soldiers have been placing 20,000 phone calls to residents of Gaza, urging them to leave, dropping 1.5 million leaflets, sending 10 million SMS.
Well, what about those that can't move from the hospitals?
We understand that it is very difficult. Israel also has its own internally displaced person problem. We have 250,000 evacuees, including elderly people, including sick people who've been forced to leave Sderot, who've been forced to leave Kiryat Shmona up in the north because we want to get them out of harm's way. And we want Palestinians to get out of harm's way as well. And we think that anyone in the international community genuinely concerned for civilians should be helping and encouraging that evacuation of civilians to get them out of harm's way. That is their responsibility under international law, instead of criticizing Israel for doing everything it can, more than any army in the history of warfare, by the way, to keep the other side's civilians safe from the consequences of their own leaders' reckless endangerment of them.
So you're saying if they've not been able to get out of the way for whatever reason, they may not be able to physically or they don't have the means to be able to transport themselves from Gaza City, they are collateral damage.
We are urging people to get out of the way. We do not want to see anyone being hurt. But this war has only one way that it can end, with the total defeat of the Hamas terror state that perpetrated October 7th. We don't want to be in this situation, Kay. We really, really don't. But Hamas is openly saying in English, it will perpetrate another October 7th, a second, a third, a fourth, as many as it takes to murder every man, woman, child in this country and destroy our country. That is the threat that we are fighting against. And we're doing everything we can to specifically target the terrorists who perpetrated it. Just today, we announced we took out a terror mastermind behind the Hamas weapons facilities and doing everything we can to get civilians out of harm's way. Now, I'm not aware of any conflict in history that has seen no civilians being killed. Civilians get hurt in war. That is a tragic consequence of war. But this isn't a war that we started or wanted or even expected. It's a war that Hamas declared on us. And it's a war that we have no choice but to win. And we're going to do so, upholding our obligations under international law and going above and beyond to keep the other side's civilians safe from their own leaders' reckless decision to try to keep them in harm's way.
Okay, I mean, I am looking at the Geneva Convention, Article 51, saying civilians shall not be the object of attack in war, also prohibiting indiscriminate attacks, which are those that may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, like bombing hospitals.
International law insists on the rule of proportionality. The rule of proportionality says that in each specific strike, collateral damage, the unfortunate, tragic harm to civilians, may not be excessive to the expected gain of that strike. And the expected gain of our operation is to dismantle the terror state that on October 7th brutally murdered, butchered, beheaded, burned, tortured, and mutilated 1,400 of our people. And we are going above and beyond. I don't recall the international coalition that laid waste to Mosul and Raqqa to defeat ISIS going to such lengths to get civilians out of harm's way. We are targeting Hamas, and we are doing everything we can to keep civilians out of harm's way, because our goal here is to go after the terrorists who perpetrated the October 7th massacre, so that can never happen again. That is the goal of our war, and that is what we are pursuing.
We're almost out of time. Just clarify for me, please, if you would, hearing that the Hamas leader is encircled in Gaza City by the IDF. What's the latest on that?
The IDF has encircled Gaza City, and it is pushing on inside and destroying the terror infrastructure responsible for the October 7th massacre, taking out the weapons, taking out the tunnels, taking out the command centers. And that's what we're going to continue doing until victory.
Yeah, but is the Hamas leader there? Is he encircled?
I can't speak to specific operational matters, but the whole of Gaza City is encircled and we're moving in.
Thank you for joining us on the programme, Mr. Levy.
Thank you, Kay.